The dining room was silent except for the sound of silverware against porcelain. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she set down her fork. My father wouldn't look at me. My older brother, Daniel, stared at his plate like it held answers he desperately needed. My sister, Rebecca, the golden child who'd never been wrong about anything in her entire life, looked like she'd swallowed glass. "We didn't know you were capable of this," my mother finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a sip of water. Calm. Controlled. The way I'd learned to be over years of being invisible in this house. Capable of what exactly? I asked. Daniel's jaw clenched. Rebecca looked away. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. They still thought this was an accident. A lucky break. A fluke. They were searching for any explanation that didn't require them to rewrite the entire story they'd told themselves about me for 28 years. The useless one. The slow one. The disappointment. I could see them trying to reconcile the person sitting before them with the child they'd written off. The cognitive dissonance was delicious. "How long have you been planning this?" Daniel asked, and there it was, the assumption that I'd been scheming, plotting, being deceptive. Because in their minds, I couldn't have simply become someone they'd underestimated. There had to be manipulation involved. I smiled. Not warm. Not cold. Just knowing. "I wasn't planning anything," I said truthfully. "I was just done waiting for you to see me." Rebecca made a small sound. Half scoff, half something else. Disbelief, maybe. Or the first crack in her certainty. My mother's eyes glistened. "We always saw you." "No," I interrupted gently. "You didn't. But that's okay now. I learned to see myself." They wanted an explanation. An apology, maybe. Some acknowledgement that I'd been wrong about them, that they'd been good parents, good siblings, that this was all a misunderstanding. But they forgot something important. They forgot that for 15 years, from age 13 to 28, I watched them. Studied them. Learned how they operated, what they valued, where their blind spots were. They thought my silence meant I wasn't paying attention. They were the ones who taught me how to survive. And survival, I'd learned, sometimes looks a lot like winning. It started when I was 7, though I didn't have words for it then. We were at my grandmother's house for Sunday dinner, the kind of obligation that felt more like performance than family gathering. Rebecca had just won some award at school. I don't remember what, there were so many, and my parents were glowing with pride. Daniel had made the varsity soccer team as a freshman, which apparently was remarkable. "And what about you, sweetheart?" my grandmother asked me, her smile polite but distant. "What have you been up to?" I opened my mouth to talk about the story I'd written, the one my teacher said showed real imagination. But my father spoke first. "Oh, still trying to figure things out." He said it with a laugh, like it was charming. Like I was charming in my confusion. I was 7. By 10, the label had calcified. "Not like your siblings" became a refrain, sometimes said with concern, sometimes with barely concealed frustration. Teachers would mention Daniel or Rebecca first at conferences, then add, "And we're working with them to catch up," as if I were a project, not a person. I wasn't failing. I got B's, sometimes A's. I had friends. I liked reading and drawing and spending time alone. But in a family of exceptional children, average became invisible. And invisible became useless. "Why can't you be more like Rebecca?" my mother asked once when I was 12, after I'd forgotten to turn in a permission slip for a field trip. Rebecca never forgot anything. Rebecca had color-coded calendars and backup plans, and probably a strategic life map that extended to age 40. I wanted to say, because I'm not Rebecca. Because maybe I don't want to be. But I learned early that talking back, defending yourself, showing frustration, these things made you difficult. And difficult was worse than useless. So I stopped defending myself. I became agreeable. Compliant. When they made jokes at my expense at dinner, "Better hide the instructions, you know how they get confused," Daniel would say when we played board games. I laughed along. When Rebecca corrected me in front of her friends, explaining things I already knew in that patient, condescending voice, I nodded like she'd enlightened me. The mask became comfortable. Easier than fighting. By 16, I barely recognized my own opinions. I'd learned to pause before speaking, to scan the room and calculate what response would cause the least friction. I'd learned to make myself small. At family gatherings, I perfected the art of fading into corners. I could spend 3 hours at a party and have exactly 2 conversations, both initiated by distant aunts who felt obligated. I watched my siblings hold court, charismatic and confident, while I nursed the same drink for hours. "They're just shy," I heard my mother explain once. "Not everyone can be a people person." Shy. That was generous. The truth was closer to, trained into silence. The worst part wasn't the label itself. The worst part was that I started believing it. Maybe I was slower. Maybe I was missing something fundamental that came naturally to others. Maybe there was something wrong with me, some essential piece that hadn't formed correctly, and everyone could see it except me. That belief settled into my bones like concrete. I stopped trying as hard. Why bother? I'd only be compared to Daniel's effortless excellence or Rebecca's calculated perfection. Better to not try and avoid the comparison than to try and fail publicly. By 18, I'd become exactly what they'd always said I was. The unremarkable one. The one you didn't worry about because they'd probably be fine, just fine. Not great. Not terrible. Just there. And that was the moment I learned something dangerous. Silence made them comfortable. My quietness, my agreeableness, my lack of demands, it let them feel like good parents, good siblings, good people. They weren't cruel, after all. They didn't scream or hit. They included me in things. They just didn't expect much. And not expecting much meant they didn't have to see much. I became furniture in my own family. Functional. Unremarkable. Easily overlooked. That realization should have devastated me. Instead, somewhere deep in that silence, something else began to form. Something patient. Something that watched and waited and learned. College was supposed to be different. That's what everyone said. You'll find your people. You'll discover yourself. Everything changes after high school. I went to the state university 40 minutes from home. Daniel had gone to an elite private school on the East Coast. Rebecca was at a prestigious program abroad. I got the practical choice, the safe option, the good fit for someone like you recommendation from my guidance counselor. I didn't fight it. My parents helped me move into the dorms with the efficiency of people checking off a task. My mother cried a little, but it felt performative, the kind of emotion you're supposed to display when your youngest leaves home. My father gave me an awkward hug and a check for emergencies. Call if you need anything, my mother said. I did call. Once a week at first, then every other week, then monthly. The conversations followed a pattern. They'd ask how I was, fine. I'd ask about them, busy. They'd update me on Daniel's internship or Rebecca's latest achievement, and we'd say goodbye. They never asked what I was studying with any real curiosity. They never asked about my friends, my thoughts, my life beyond the surface. And slowly I realized something. They were relieved. Not having me home meant one less person to manage, to worry about, to fit into their narrative. Daniel was the success story. Rebecca was the prodigy. I was handled. Checked off the list. College, check. Not causing problems, check. Moving through life adequately, check. The invisible child had become the forgotten one. But here's what they didn't know. I was paying attention in ways I never had before. I started noticing patterns. My mother would call me when she needed something. Could I pick up a package? Could I house sit? Could I help Rebecca move apartments? But rarely just to talk. My father forwarded me job postings with subject lines like, "Thought of you." Always for entry-level positions he'd never suggest to Daniel. Family group texts became anthropological studies. I'd watch how they communicated, what they valued, what got attention and what got ignored. Daniel's promotion announcement got 47 messages. Rebecca's article publication got 63. My dean's list achievement got 4, 3 of them from my parents saying, "Proud of you," with punctuation that felt like obligation. I learned that my mother saved her longest phone calls for Rebecca, that my father's voice changed when he talked about Daniel, became warmer, more animated. I learned that my siblings had their own text chain without me, which I discovered accidentally when Daniel mentioned something in the family group that had clearly been discussed elsewhere first. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was fascinated. It was like being an anthropologist studying a tribe I'd once belonged to. I could see the dynamics clearly now, without the fog of desperate need for their approval. I saw how my mother's self-worth was tied to her children's achievements, how she name-dropped them at parties like credentials. I saw how my father measured love in terms of success, how affection flowed toward accomplishment. I saw how Daniel's confidence was actually fragile, requiring constant validation, and how Rebecca's perfectionism masked a deep fear of being ordinary. I saw how they needed me small to make themselves feel big. And I stopped trying to change their minds. Instead, I started building something they couldn't see. I declared a major in information systems, boring and practical enough that no one questioned it. I took internships they never asked about. I joined clubs I never mentioned. I made friends I didn't bring home. I created a life in the negative space they'd left for me. When they called with requests, I complied. When they forgot my birthday, I didn't mention it. When they made plans without including me, I adjusted without complaint. I became easier to overlook than ever. My mother once told a neighbor in my presence, "This one's just easier. Not as much drama as the others." She meant it as a compliment. I smiled and said nothing. Because I was learning something crucial. Invisibility is a superpower if you know how to use it. People who don't see you can't track what you're doing. They can't interfere, can't sabotage, can't redirect. They leave you alone in ways that feel like neglect but function like freedom. So I used it. I networked quietly. I built skills deliberately. I saved money carefully. I read everything, learned constantly, asked questions to people who actually answered them. I found mentors who saw potential in me. Not because I was exceptional, but because I was hungry in a way that privileged kids rarely are. I was hungry for proof that the story my family told about me wasn't true. By my senior year, I had job offers they never knew I'd applied for. I had references from people whose names they'd recognize, but whose connection to me they'd never understand. I had a plan that didn't include asking them for anything. The day I graduated, they came, took photos, went to dinner. My mother posted on social media, "So proud of all my babies," with a collage that included my graduation photo the same size as Daniel's vacation snapshot and Rebecca's conference keynote. Equal representation. All accounted for. That night, I went back to my apartment and looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. Not searching for what was wrong or missing or insufficient. Just seeing. And for the first time in years, I didn't see the useless child. I saw someone who'd survived by becoming a ghost in their own family. Someone who'd learned to be patient. Someone who'd figured out that the best revenge wasn't confrontation. It was results they couldn't explain away. They didn't realize they were losing access to me. Not because I'd cut them off, but because I was building a door they hadn't known was there, and I was the only one with the key. It happened 3 months after graduation, at Rebecca's engagement party. I should have seen it coming. Every family gathering had become a stage for someone else's triumph, and I'd perfected my role as the supportive background character. Show up, smile, make appropriate noises, leave. The party was at my parents' house, catered and elegant. Rebecca's fiancé, James, came from the kind of family that summered as a verb. The guest list was a strategic mix of family, influential friends, and people my parents wanted to impress. I wore what I always wore, something modest, inoffensive, designed to blend. I arrived on time. I brought an appropriate gift. I prepared myself for 6 hours of being politely ignored. The first hour was predictable. Rebecca held court in the living room, showing off her ring, telling the proposal story with practiced charm. My mother orchestrated the event like a conductor, making sure everyone saw what a beautiful, successful, perfect family we were. I helped in the kitchen when needed, refilled drinks, collected plates, made myself useful in invisible ways. Then Daniel arrived late, slightly drunk, with his girlfriend of 3 months. My mother's smile tightened but held. My father clapped him on the back. Even disheveled and irresponsible, Daniel commanded the room's energy in ways I never had. "There's the golden boy," someone's aunt said, and everyone laughed because it was true but said with enough affection to make it acceptable. I was in the corner, holding a glass of wine I wasn't drinking, when my uncle approached. He was my father's brother, successful in the same industry, cut from the same cloth. "So," he said, in that way people do when they feel obligated to make conversation but haven't prepared anything meaningful to say. "What are you up to these days?" "Working in tech," I said simply. "Information systems." "Ah." He nodded like I'd confirmed something. "That's practical. Good for you. Someone's got to do the behind-the-scenes work, right?" "Behind-the-scenes work. Code for. Not important enough to discuss." "Right," I agreed. He patted my shoulder and moved on, gravitating toward Daniel's orbit. I could have left it there. Should have. But then my mother gathered everyone for toasts. My father went first, eloquent about Rebecca's achievements, her worthiness, how proud he was to watch her build a life of such promise. James's father went next, welcoming Rebecca into their family with warmth that seemed genuine. Then my mother stood, glass raised, eyes glistening with theatrical emotion. "I've been so blessed," she began, "to have such extraordinary children. Daniel, who's making his mark in his field. And Rebecca, my beautiful girl, who's never done anything halfway in her life." The guests applauded. Rebecca glowed. My mother continued, voice catching. "People ask me all the time, how did you raise such successful kids?" And I tell them, you give them roots and wings. You set high expectations and support them when they soar. More applause. Someone said, "Here, here." I felt myself disappearing, molecule by molecule. Not mentioned. Not acknowledged. Not even a throwaway line like, "And of course our youngest." Just absent. It wasn't new. But something about that moment, the performance of it, the rewriting of history, the audacity of claiming credit for children you'd supported selectively, cracked something inside me. I didn't cry. Didn't make a scene. Didn't even leave early. I stayed until the end, helped clean up, hugged Rebecca goodbye, told her I was happy for her. And I meant it. Her engagement wasn't the problem. She'd worked hard for her life. Good for her. The problem was that my mother could stand in a room full of people and publicly claim to have 3 children while functionally acknowledging 2. I drove home to my small apartment across town, the one no one in my family had visited. I poured a real drink. And I sat in the dark, not with sadness but with crystalline clarity. That night, I stopped wanting their approval. Not in a dramatic, rebellious way. Not with anger or hurt. Just stopped. The need for them to see me, value me, recognize me. It had been driving me for 28 years, even when I pretended it wasn't. Every achievement had been partially for them. Every success measured against whether it might finally make them look at me differently. But sitting in that dark apartment, I realized something profound. Their opinion of me was based on a story they'd decided to tell when I was 7 years old. And nothing I did would ever rewrite that story because they needed it to be true. They needed me to be less so they could be more. And I was done participating. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 100 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. I pulled out my laptop and started making a list. Not a revenge plan, nothing so dramatic. Just a practical inventory of every connection I'd made, every skill I'd built, every opportunity I'd positioned myself for that my family knew nothing about. It was longer than I'd realized. I'd spent 4 years becoming someone in spaces my family never looked. I had mentors who respected me, colleagues who valued my work, a network that stretched into industries my parents couldn't access through their usual channels. I had something they'd never given me. Proof of my own capacity. That night, I didn't decide to unleash hell in some explosive, confrontational way. I decided something quieter. More surgical. I decided to stop limiting myself to make them comfortable. I decided to stop shrinking. I decided to show up fully in my own life and let them deal with the cognitive dissonance. And I decided that when they finally noticed, because they would, eventually, they'd have to confront every assumption they'd ever made about who I was and what I was capable of. Not because I'd force them to, but because reality would. That was the day I decided to unleash hell. The kind that looks like peace from the outside, but is actually the controlled demolition of every lie they'd ever told themselves about me. The change was subtle at first. Strategic. I stopped answering calls immediately. Let them go to voicemail. Responded with texts hours later. Sorry, missed this. Work's busy. I declined the next family dinner. Then the one after that. Can't make it, have plans became my default response. I didn't explain what plans. Didn't justify. Just wasn't available. My mother called, concerned. Are you okay? You seem distant. I'm fine, I said truthfully. Just focused on work. What's keeping you so busy? Projects. The usual. I kept my answers bland, generic, designed to be unremarkable enough that she'd stop asking. It worked. The family group text continued without me. They'd share updates, make plans, post photos. I'd read everything, react occasionally with a thumbs-up emoji, but stopped contributing. Stopped asking questions. Stopped being present even when I was technically there. It was like slowly turning down my volume in their lives until I was just background noise. The fascinating thing was how long it took them to notice. 3 months passed before my mother commented, "We haven't seen you in forever." I know. Work's intense right now. What exactly are you doing? Tech stuff. Consulting. It's boring to explain. I wasn't lying. I'd taken a position at a mid-sized firm that specialized in digital infrastructure for corporations. The work was complex, technical, and completely outside my family's sphere of understanding. When I mentioned information systems or digital architecture, their eyes glazed over. Perfect. What I didn't tell them was that I was good at it. Really good. The kind of good where senior partners took notice, where clients requested me specifically, where promotions came faster than expected. I was 29 when I led my first major project, overhauling a healthcare network's entire data security system. It was high stakes, high stress, and exactly the kind of work that required the skills I'd been building in silence. Attention to detail, pattern recognition, the ability to see systems holistically while managing microscopic components. All the things I'd learned by watching my family, actually. The project succeeded. More than succeeded. We came in under budget, ahead of schedule, and the client was so impressed they became our firm's biggest advocate. My name started circulating in industry circles. Not widely, I wasn't famous, but within the niche world of digital infrastructure, people knew my work. I spoke at a conference, published a white paper, got headhunted by 3 different firms. I told my family none of this. When Rebecca asked what I was up to, I said, same old stuff. How's wedding planning? Redirect. Deflect. Let them talk about themselves. The irony was that I'd learned this technique from them. They'd spent years pivoting conversations away from me toward more interesting subjects. Now I did the same, but deliberately. I built a life in compartments they couldn't access. I had work friends who became real friends. I dated casually, never bringing anyone home. I traveled for work, but posted nothing on social media. I got promoted twice in 18 months, but didn't announce it. I existed fully in spaces they never looked. The family still called occasionally, usually when they needed something. Could I help Daniel move? Could I pick up my grandmother from the airport? Could I attend some event as a body in a seat? I helped when I could, declined when I couldn't. No guilt. No over-explaining. My mother complained to my aunt. I heard through the family grapevine that I'd become hard to pin down. They're just busy, my aunt said. Young people are like that. My mother accepted this because it fit the narrative. I was busy with my little job, my small life, nothing particularly noteworthy but adequate. Meanwhile, I was being courted by a major firm in the city. The kind of firm that worked with Fortune 500 companies, that shaped industry standards, that paid salaries my family would assume were executive level. I took the interviews seriously, prepared meticulously, brought my portfolio of work, real results, measurable impacts, innovations that had saved clients millions. The senior partner interviewing me was a woman named Diana, sharp-eyed and direct. Your work is impressive, she said, but you're young for this level of responsibility. Why should we trust you with our most important clients? I didn't hesitate, because I've spent my entire life being underestimated. I'm used to proving people wrong. She smiled. Not the polite kind, the recognition kind. When can you start? I gave my notice that week. My boss tried to counteroffer, but I'd already decided. This wasn't just a job change. It was a door opening to a version of my life that existed completely independently of my family's expectations. I signed the contract on my 30th birthday. Alone in my apartment. No celebration. No announcement. Just quiet satisfaction. That weekend, there was a family barbecue. I went because I'd run out of excuses and didn't want to trigger suspicion by being too absent. Daniel dominated the conversation, talking about his latest deal. Rebecca discussed honeymoon planning. My parents orbited them like planets around suns, attentive and engaged. I sat in a lawn chair, scrolling through emails on my phone. Work emails. Strategy documents. Communications with clients whose names would mean something to my father, if he paid attention. Still glued to that phone, my mother said, passing by with a pitcher of lemonade. Not quite criticism, not quite concern. Just observation. Work stuff, I said. Can it wait? It's Sunday. Unfortunately, no. She sighed and moved on, satisfied that I was exactly what she'd always thought. A drone, married to an unremarkable job, lacking the work-life balance of truly successful people. I watched her go and felt nothing. No resentment. No hurt. Just the cool, clinical distance of someone studying a subject they'd once been emotionally entangled with. As I was leaving, my father caught me at the door. Everything okay? He asked. You seem somewhere else. I'm good, I said. Just tired. Work's ramping up. Still at that tech place? Transitioning, actually. New opportunity. Oh, he looked interested for the first time in recent memory. Doing what? Similar work. Bigger scope. It's technical, probably boring to explain. He nodded, already losing interest. Well, that's great. Good to see you moving forward. Moving forward. Like I'd been stagnant before. Like this was the beginning of progress rather than the continuation of a path I'd been walking for years. I smiled. Thanks, Dad. I drove home thinking about that phrase, moving forward. They had no idea how far forward I'd already moved. They didn't realize they were losing access to me. Not to punishment or spite, but to simple physics. I was going places they couldn't follow, not because those places were locked to them, but because they'd never thought to look for the door. And every day, every new project, every promotion, every connection, I was walking further through that door. Soon, I'd be so far on the other side that when they finally looked up and noticed I was gone, they wouldn't be able to see me at all. My first day at the new firm, Diana handed me 3 client files. "These are ours to lose," she said bluntly. "They're unhappy with our current approach, considering other options. Fix it. No hand-holding. No gradual onboarding. Just prove yourself." I loved it. The first client was a pharmaceutical company with a data management system, held together by duct tape and prayers. Their infrastructure was vulnerable, inefficient, and costing them millions in redundancy and risk exposure. The previous team had proposed a standard overhaul, expensive, time-consuming, disruptive. I spent 2 weeks just listening, talking to their IT staff, their executives, their end users. Understanding not just what was broken, but why it had broken, what they'd tried before, what constraints they were operating under. Then I proposed something different. Not a complete demolition, but a surgical intervention. Targeted upgrades that addressed critical vulnerabilities while building on existing architecture where it actually worked. Faster implementation, lower cost, less disruption. They were skeptical. "This seems too simple," their CTO said. "Simple isn't easy," I countered. "But effective doesn't have to be complicated. We implemented in phases. Each phase worked. The system stabilized. Their costs dropped. Within 3 months, they'd extended the contract and recommended us to 2 other companies. Diana called me into her office. "You just saved us $1 million account." "I know." She laughed. "Confidence. Good. Don't lose it." But it wasn't confidence, not exactly. It was something else, the absence of self-doubt. I'd spent so long questioning myself, wondering if maybe my family was right about my limitations, that when I finally stopped, when I just did the work without that internal commentary, things became clear. I was good at this. Not because I was exceptional or brilliant, but because I paid attention. Because I listened. Because I'd spent years reading rooms and noticing patterns and understanding what people needed versus what they said they needed. All skills learned from survival. The second and third clients followed similar trajectories. Problems everyone assumed were intractable turned out to be solvable if you looked at them differently. I wasn't revolutionary. I was just willing to question assumptions everyone else took as given. 6 months in, Diana promoted me to senior consultant. My salary tripled from what I'd made at my previous job. I moved to a better apartment. Started dressing differently, not dramatically but consciously. Invested in quality clothes, got a better haircut, walked into rooms like I belonged there. Because I did. The transformation wasn't external, though. It was internal. I started noticing thoughts I'd had for years that I'd never voiced. Opinions about strategy, critiques of standard approaches, ideas I'd assumed were naive or wrong because I'd learned early not to trust my own judgment. Turned out, most of those instincts were correct. In meetings, I spoke up. Disagreed with senior partners when I thought they were wrong. Pushed back on clients who wanted solutions that would create more problems down the line. And people listened. Not always. Not everyone. But enough that my reputation grew. Difficult but right was how one colleague described me, and I took it as a compliment. I started getting invited to industry events, networking dinners, speaking opportunities. Other firms tried to poach me. Clients asked for me by name. At one conference, I ran into someone from my college program, someone who'd been conventionally successful, always knew the right people, seemed destined for easy achievement. "Holy shit," he said when he saw my name on the speaker roster. "I had no idea you were doing this level of work." "Most people don't," I said simply. "You should promote yourself more. You're actually impressive." I smiled. I'm good with the right people knowing. Because I'd learned something crucial. You don't need everyone's validation. You need the right people's respect. And the right people, the ones who mattered in my field, were paying attention. My name started appearing in industry publications. Not features, just mentions. Consultant X working with firm Y noted that. Small acknowledgments, but they added up. I won an award for innovative solutions in digital infrastructure. It was a niche award, nothing my family would have heard of, but within my industry it meant something. I didn't tell them. Why would I? They wouldn't understand what it meant. They'd smile politely and change the subject to Daniel's latest accomplishment or Rebecca's upcoming wedding. The wedding. Right. I got the invitation 4 months before the event. Formal. Expensive cardstock. My name misspelled on the envelope. Jordan instead of Jamie. Small oversight. Probably my mother's assistant. But telling. I RSVP'd yes because not going would cause questions I didn't want to answer yet. But I noted the date and started planning around it. By then I was leading a team of 4. Younger consultants who looked to me for guidance. I mentored them the way I'd wished someone had mentored me. With honest feedback, genuine investment, no games. One of them, Priya, asked me once, "How do you stay so calm under pressure?" I thought about it. I spent years in situations where showing stress was punished. You learn to process internally. That sounds unhealthy. It was. But the skill itself is useful once you're in a healthier environment. She looked at me curiously. You don't talk about your personal life much. No, I agreed. Bad relationship with your family? Complicated. I paused. They don't know what I do. Not really. Why not? Because they decided who I was a long time ago. And I stopped trying to change their minds. Priya nodded slowly. That sounds lonely. Sometimes, I admitted. But it's also freeing. And it was. For the first time in my life, I existed in spaces where I wasn't prejudged. Where my value was based on what I contributed, not who I was related to or what narrative had been written about me before I had any say in it. I worked long hours but felt less exhausted than I had working part-time in college. Because the work mattered. Because people noticed. Because when I spoke, others listened without surprise, without the subtle condescension I'd lived with for decades. The day before Rebecca's wedding, I got an email from Diana. We're bidding on the Anderson project. $20 million contract. I want you leading strategy. Thoughts? Anderson. One of the biggest healthcare conglomerates in the country. The kind of client that could define a career. I wrote back. I'm in. Let's win it. Then I packed for the wedding weekend, choosing my outfit carefully. Not to impress them, but to remind myself, I'm not who they think I am anymore. And suddenly, my name mattered. Not to my family. Not yet. But to people who actually paid attention. The wedding weekend started with a rehearsal dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. 50 people, open bar, the kind of event designed to demonstrate status. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a tailored suit that had cost more than my entire wardrobe from college. I'd gotten a fresh haircut, paid attention to details. Not peacocking. Just present. Polished. My mother did a double take when she saw me. Oh, don't you look nice? Thanks. That suit, is that new? Relatively. She touched the fabric lightly, curious. Must be doing well at work. Can't complain. Before she could probe further, Daniel appeared with his girlfriend, now fiancée, Melissa. When had that happened? I'd missed the announcement somehow. Looking sharp, Daniel said, that edge of surprise in his voice. Like he'd expected me to show up in khakis and a wrinkled button-down. You too. The evening followed familiar patterns. Rebecca at the center, radiant and orchestrating. James's family, wealthy and polished. My parents working the room. Daniel charming clusters of guests. I found a spot at the bar and ordered a decent scotch. The bartender, a guy about my age, made conversation. You with the bride or groom? Bride's sister. Brother. I corrected reflexively, then caught myself. Sorry, sibling. He smiled. Big family? 3 of us. I'm the youngest. Let me guess, the overlooked one? I laughed, startled. That obvious? I've worked 100 of these things. I can spot the family dynamics. He slid me my drink. For what it's worth, the overlooked ones are usually the most interesting. Or the most boring. Nah. The boring ones are the ones in the spotlight. They have to be obvious because they're scared of being forgotten. People who get comfortable being unseen? They're doing it by choice. I considered that. Not always by choice. Maybe not at first. But eventually. He moved to help another customer, leaving me with that thought. Not always by choice. But eventually. The dinner itself seated me at a table with distant cousins and family friends I barely knew. Not the main family table. Not even close to it. Fine. I'd expected nothing else. What I hadn't expected was the conversation. So what do you do? Asked the woman next to me, Aunt Linda's friend whose name I'd already forgotten. I'm a senior consultant. Digital infrastructure. Oh, polite smile. That sounds technical. It is. But then one of my cousins, Tyler, leaned forward. Wait, digital infrastructure? Like cybersecurity and systems architecture? Among other things. That's actually huge right now. My company just spent 6 months trying to find someone who knew what they were doing in that space. Who do you work for? I named the firm. Tyler's eyes widened. You work for Morrison and Associates? For about a year now. Holy shit. They're like top tier. My CEO wanted to hire them but couldn't get a meeting. The table's energy shifted. Suddenly people were interested. Asking questions. Actually listening to my answers. It was disorienting. Across the room I caught my mother's eye. She was watching our table with a curious expression, probably wondering what had animated the conversation. After dinner, during the cocktail portion, my father approached. Tyler was telling me about your work. Said you're with some impressive firm. Morrison and Associates. HM. Can't say I know them. Of course not. They operated in spaces he didn't. His world was finance and traditional corporate structures. Mine was the invisible infrastructure that made those structures possible. We're specialized, I said. And you're doing well there? Very. He nodded, that familiar look of mild approval. Like I'd managed to meet the minimum bar. That's good. Good for you. Before I could respond, Rebecca swept over, radiant and demanding attention. There you are. I feel like I've barely seen you. Are you having fun? It's lovely. You look beautiful. Thank you. She hugged me, perfume overwhelming. I'm so glad you're here. I know work keeps you busy. Always. What is it you do again? Something with computers? Something with computers. A 30-year-old running a team at one of the premier consulting firms in the industry. And to my sister I did something with computers. Systems architecture and digital security. I said evenly. Right. That's great. Already distracted, looking over my shoulder. Oh, I need to say hi to James's aunt. We'll catch up more this weekend, okay? She floated away. I finished my drink and considered leaving early. But then Diana texted. Anderson team wants preliminary strategy Monday. Can you draft over the weekend? I wrote back. On it. The wedding itself was spectacular. Everything perfect, from the flowers to the timing to Rebecca's dress. She looked genuinely happy, and I felt genuinely glad for her. Whatever our family dynamics, she'd worked hard for her life. She deserved her happiness. During the reception, my mother gathered the family for photos. The photographer arranged us, parents in the center, Daniel and Rebecca flanking them, me at the edge. Get closer, the photographer instructed. You're barely in the frame. I stepped in slightly. Not too much. Just enough. The photographer snapped several shots, then checked his camera. Great. Beautiful family. Later, Daniel found me at my table, slightly drunk, but not sloppy. Hey, having fun? Sure. He sat down heavily. You know what's weird? Tyler wouldn't shut up about your job. Says you're some kind of big deal. Tyler exaggerates. No, but really. He showed me your firm's website. You guys work with huge companies. Sometimes. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at him. Would you have listened? He blinked. Opened his mouth. Closed it. That's not fair. Isn't it? We're your family. Of course we'd listen. I let the silence sit between us. All those years of trying to tell them about my life, my work, my thoughts, met with polite disinterest or quick pivots to more interesting subjects. And now he wanted to rewrite that history. It's fine, Daniel. I'm not upset. You seem upset. I'm really not. I'm just busy. Distracted. Big project at work. On a weekend? Client doesn't care what day it is. He studied me with unfocused eyes. You've changed. People do. No, I mean you're different. More. I don't know. Present, but also more distant. That's probably the Scotch talking. He laughed, breaking the tension. Maybe. But seriously, we should hang out more. Get dinner or something. I feel like I don't know what's going on with you. That's because you don't ask, I said, not unkindly. Then I'm asking. What's going on with you? I considered telling him. About the Anderson project. About the award. About the apartment I'd bought last month. Bought, not rented, in a neighborhood he'd recognize as expensive. About the speaking engagement in Singapore next month. About the consulting offer from a Fortune 50 company I'd turned down because Morrison was better positioned for my career arc. But I didn't. Because this wasn't the moment. This was Rebecca's weekend, and besides, Daniel's interest would evaporate by Monday when he was sober and back in his own life. Work's good. Life's good. Nothing dramatic. Dating anyone? Casually. You should bring someone to the next family thing. We never meet anyone you're seeing. Maybe. He patted my shoulder and stood. Okay, well. Good talk. Don't be a stranger. He wandered back to his table, and I checked my phone. Email from Priya. Saw the Anderson brief. You're going to crush this pitch. I smiled and replied, that's the plan. The weekend continued. Brunch the next day, more photos, extended family asking polite questions about my computer work. My mother pulled me aside at one point. People seem very interested in what you're doing. Tyler was quite impressed. Tyler's easily impressed. Don't sell yourself short. She squeezed my arm. I'm proud of you, you know. Even if I don't always say it. Thanks, Mom. We should have lunch soon. Really catch up. I feel like you've been so distant lately. Just busy. I know, but we miss you. Your father and I were talking, and we realized we haven't really seen you in months. I was here last month for Dad's birthday. For 2 hours. You left before we even cut the cake. I had a client call. On a Saturday night? Different time zones. She sighed. I just want to make sure you're okay. You know you can talk to us if something's wrong. Something's wrong. The default assumption. Not that I might be thriving, but that my distance indicated a problem. Nothing's wrong, I assured her. Genuinely. Work is intense but good. Life is full. I'm happy. You don't seem happy. I'm content. Maybe that looks different than what you expect. She studied my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. You've always been hard to read. Have I? Even as a child. Your siblings wore everything on their faces. But you. She trailed off. Sometimes I worried we didn't understand you. It was the closest she'd ever come to acknowledging the distance between us. And it was still framed as my inscrutability, not their inattention. I'm fine, Mom. Really. She hugged me, and I let her, and I felt nothing but a vague fondness. Like hugging a pleasant acquaintance. Driving home Sunday evening, I thought about the weekend. The looks of surprise. Daniel's drunken observation. Tyler's genuine interest. My mother's belated concern. They were starting to notice something had shifted. Not the full picture yet, but the edges of it. The dissonance between who they thought I was and who I actually was becoming. They still didn't know the truth. And I was about to make sure they found out all at once. The Anderson pitch was in 6 weeks. I assembled my team. Priya, 2 other senior consultants, and a data analyst who could make numbers sing. We worked like surgeons preparing for a complex operation. Precise, methodical, obsessed with details. Anderson's problem was massive. A healthcare network spanning 12 states with incompatible systems, security vulnerabilities that kept their legal team awake at night, and a board of directors who didn't trust technology they couldn't see. Everyone in the industry wanted this contract. We were competing against 4 other firms, all with stronger name recognition. But I understood something our competitors didn't. Anderson's real problem wasn't technical. It was trust. 3 weeks before the pitch, I got a call from my mother. Hi, sweetheart. How are you? Busy. What's up? Your father and I are having a dinner party next month. Nothing big, just some colleagues and friends. We'd love for you to come. It's been so long since you've been around for something like this. I checked my calendar. The dinner was 2 days after the Anderson pitch. What date? She told me. I might be able to make it. Let me see how work shakes out. You work too hard, she said, but fondly now, like my workaholism was charming rather than concerning. Big project wrapping up. After that, things should calm down. Well, try to come. Your father specifically asked me to invite you. He's been thinking about you lately. Has he? He mentioned the other day that he doesn't really know what you do. He'd like to understand better. I felt something twist in my chest. Not hope, I'd killed that years ago, but something sharper. Anticipation. Sure. I'll explain it to him. We finalized the Anderson strategy the week before the pitch. It was bold. Instead of the standard infrastructure overhaul, we proposed a phased integration system that would unify their networks without forcing compatibility. Let different systems communicate through a centralized hub rather than replacing everything. Cheaper, faster, more flexible. Diana reviewed the proposal and looked up at me with something like awe. This could change how the industry thinks about legacy system integration. That's the idea. If we pull this off, you're not just saving the firm. You're making your reputation. I know. The pitch day arrived. Anderson's executive team filled their conference room. CEO, CFO, CTO, head of operations, 3 board members. They looked skeptical before we'd even started. I led the presentation. Spoke for 40 minutes without notes. Addressed every concern before they asked. Used their own data to illustrate points. Made technical concepts accessible without dumbing them down. Halfway through, I saw their body language change. Leaning forward instead of back. Taking notes instead of checking phones. When I finished, the CEO, a woman named Patricia who'd built the network from 2 hospitals to an empire, sat back and smiled. That was the first pitch where someone actually listened to us. That's because your people are the experts, I said. Our job isn't to replace their expertise. It's to give them better tools. 3 weeks later, we got the contract. $23 million. 3-year implementation. Option for expansion. Diana called me into her office and closed the door. You just landed the biggest deal in firm history. I corrected. The team was essential. Don't be modest. This was you. She paused. The partners want to make you a junior partner. Youngest in firm history. Junior partner. Equity stake. 7-figure compensation. Real power. When? Effective immediately. Assuming you accept. I pretended to consider, but we both knew my answer. I accept. She extended her hand. Welcome to the partnership. I shook it, and something settled in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly. More like completion. Like reaching the end of a proof, and finding out all your work was correct. That evening I texted my mother. I can make the dinner party. She responded immediately. Wonderful. Looking forward to it. I spent the next 3 days preparing. Not for the dinner, but for what came after. The evening arrived. I wore the same suit from Rebecca's wedding. Expensive, understated, professional. Drove to my parents' house in the car I'd bought last month. A sleek sedan that was nice without being ostentatious. I arrived exactly on time. My mother opened the door, eyes widening slightly at the car in the driveway. Is that new? Recent purchase. It's lovely. Come in, come in. The house was full of people I half recognized. My father's colleagues from his firm, family friends, a few couples I didn't know. Daniel was there with Melissa. Rebecca and James were fashionably late. I made polite conversation, accepted a drink, settled into observer mode. Then my father gathered everyone for dinner, a catered affair, elegant and designed to impress. I was seated between one of his colleagues and a friend of my mother's. The colleague, Gerald, made conversation. So, you're David's youngest? That's right. What field are you in? Technology consulting. Digital infrastructure and systems architecture. Ah, important work, though I confess I don't entirely understand it. Most people don't. It's meant to be invisible when it works correctly. Who do you work with? Morrison and Associates. We specialize in enterprise-level digital security and infrastructure integration. His expression changed. Morrison? I tried to get a meeting with them last year. Our board wanted to explore their services. What industry? Medical devices. We had a security incident and needed to overhaul everything. Did you find someone? Eventually. Cost us 3 times what we budgeted. He studied me with new interest. You work on projects like that. I lead them. How senior are you there? As of last week, junior partner. He nearly choked on his wine. Partner? How old are you? 30. Jesus. We should talk. My company is expanding our digital operations, and frankly, the firm we used was adequate at best. Happy to connect you with our business development team. We exchanged information, and I noticed my father watching from across the table, curiosity evident. After dinner, during coffee and dessert, my father stood to make a toast. He did this at every dinner party. Thanked guests for coming, made self-deprecating jokes, positioned himself as a humble host. And of course, he concluded, I have to brag about my children. Daniel's just been promoted to vice president at his firm. Applause. Daniel nodded modestly. Rebecca's settling into married life and already making waves in her field. More applause. Rebecca smiled brilliantly. And our youngest is, he paused, and I saw the realization hit him. He didn't actually know what to say about me. Doing very well in the technology sector. Polite applause. Vague acknowledgement. I didn't react. Just sipped my coffee and waited. Gerald, bless him, spoke up. I didn't realize your youngest was a partner at Morrison and Associates. The room went quiet. My father's smile froze. I'm sorry. Morrison and Associates. Top-tier consulting firm. Your youngest just made partner there. At 30, which is remarkable. All eyes turned to me. Is that true? My mother asked. Yes. Why didn't you say anything? You didn't ask. Daniel leaned forward. Wait, you made partner? Where? Morrison and Associates. We do digital infrastructure consulting for major corporations. I know who Morrison is, my father said slowly. They're significant. We are. And you're a partner there? Junior partner. As of last week. Rebecca looked between me and our parents, sensing something shift. That's amazing. Why didn't you tell us? It's recent news. But still, that's huge. Isn't that huge? She looked at James, who nodded. It's quite an accomplishment, James confirmed. Morrison has an excellent reputation. My father sat back down, visibly processing. What exactly do you do there? I lead major infrastructure integration projects. My team just closed a $23 million contract with Anderson Healthcare. Silence. Gerald laughed, amazed. Anderson? We tried to get them as a client 5 years ago. They're notoriously difficult. They are. But we listened to what they actually needed. My mother's hand had gone to her throat. 23 million? That's the contract value. It's a 3-year implementation with expansion options. Daniel looked stunned. How long have you been doing this? Building to it? Since college. Actually doing it at this level? About a year. A year. Rebecca's voice pitched higher. You've been doing this for a year and never mentioned it? I mentioned I was working in technology consulting. Multiple times. But not that you were, she gestured helplessly. That you were important. I didn't realize I needed to specify. The words landed like ice. Clean. Precise. Unforgiving. My father cleared his throat. I think what your sister means is that we didn't understand the scope of what you were doing. No, I agreed. You didn't. Why didn't you tell us? I set down my coffee cup, met his eyes directly. I did tell you. You didn't listen. That's not. Dad. I kept my voice level, conversational. I told you when I changed jobs. I told you I was working on major projects. I mentioned the firm name, the clients, the work. You nodded and changed the subject. Every time. We didn't realize. You didn't ask. I turned to my mother. None of you asked. Not really. You asked if I was okay, if work was fine, and when I said yes, you moved on. Because okay was all you expected from me. That's not fair, my mother said, but her voice wavered. Isn't it? I looked around the room, at all these people witnessing my family's confusion. You decided when I was 7 that I was the unremarkable one. The slow one. The one who needed patience and lowered expectations. And I spent 20 years trying to change your minds. We never said you were. Mom, you introduced me to people as our youngest, still figuring things out, until I was 28. Daniel and Rebecca got paragraphs of accomplishments. I got implications that I was a late bloomer at best. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. Looked guilty. So I stopped trying to change your minds, I continued. I stopped seeking your approval. I built a career in spaces you never looked. And I got very, very good at what I do. Good enough that people who actually pay attention know my name. We do pay attention, my father protested. You pay attention to Daniel's deals and Rebecca's publications. You notice when they succeed because you expect them to. You never expected much from me, so you never noticed when I exceeded expectations. Because you weren't looking. My mother's eyes were wet. We didn't mean to. I know. That's what makes it worse. You weren't cruel. You weren't malicious. You just didn't see me. And after a while I realized that was useful. Invisibility gave me freedom. No one interfering. No one's expectations to manage. Just me and my work and people who judged me by results. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. Other guests looked away, trapped in our family drama. Rebecca spoke quietly. We're proud of you. Now you are. Now that someone else validated my work. When it was just me telling you, it didn't matter. That's not true. Rebecca. I turned to her. You asked me what I did at your rehearsal dinner. After I'd been in my field for nearly a decade. You asked like you were making polite conversation with a stranger. She flinched. I'm not angry, I said, and meant it. I'm just done pretending this doesn't matter. You didn't believe in me when it was free. When I needed it. Now belief costs access. Access. My father's voice hardened. We're your family. Yes. And you'll always be my family. But you're not entitled to my achievements anymore. You didn't invest in them. You didn't nurture them. You didn't even notice them. So when I win awards or close deals or get promoted, you'll find out when everyone else does. Through the grapevine. Through strangers at dinner parties. Through people like Gerald who did 3 minutes of due diligence you never bothered with. This is, my father stopped. Started again. We made mistakes. We can fix this. You can't fix the past. But you can be honest about it. What do you want us to say? Nothing. I don't need apologies. I needed parents who saw me. I needed siblings who valued me. I needed a family that didn't treat my existence as an afterthought. I stood. But I stopped needing those things. I found people who provide them. So this. I gestured between us. This is just information now. You know what you missed. How you respond is up to you. I looked around the room. I apologize for disrupting your dinner party. Don't go, my mother said, standing. Please. We can talk about this. We just did. But I'll call you next week. We can have lunch. Talk calmly. I softened slightly. I'm not cutting you off. I'm just being clear about what our relationship actually is. I left through the front door, walked to my car, drove away, and felt nothing but clarity. They still thought this was about revenge, about punishment, but it wasn't. It was about truth. And truth, delivered calmly and precisely, is the most devastating weapon there is. My mother called 6 times the next day. I let them all go to voicemail. Her messages progressed from concerned to desperate. Please call me back. I need to know you're okay. We need to talk about what happened. I didn't sleep at all last night. Your father is beside himself. I waited 3 days before responding. Not to punish them. I had work to do, a team to lead, a life that existed independent of their crisis. But because I needed time to decide what I actually wanted. When I finally called back, my mother answered on the first ring. Oh, thank God. I was so worried. I'm fine. Can we see you? Please. Your father and I need to talk to you properly. Lunch. Saturday. That place near my office. We'll be there. Whatever time works. Saturday morning, I reviewed the Anderson implementation timeline. Steady progress. The client was happy. My team was performing beautifully. Everything clicking into place exactly as designed. I arrived at the restaurant 5 minutes late, not by accident, but by choice. Small assertion of control. My parents were already seated, looking older somehow. Smaller. My father's face was drawn. My mother's hands twisted a napkin nervously. I sat down and ordered coffee. Thank you for meeting us, my father started. Of course. We've been talking. A lot. About everything you said. He paused. You were right. I waited. We didn't see you, my mother continued, voice thick. We were so focused on Daniel and Rebecca, on their achievements and their needs, that we stopped paying attention to you. And when you stopped demanding attention, we let ourselves believe everything was fine. It was convenient, I said without malice. I was easy. I didn't cause problems. That's not an excuse, my father said. You deserved our attention regardless. You deserved our curiosity and investment and pride. We failed you. It was the most direct acknowledgement I'd ever gotten. But I felt detached from it, like watching actors deliver lines. Okay. That's it. My mother looked stricken. Just okay. What do you want me to say? That you forgive us. That we can fix this. I don't know if there's anything to fix, I said carefully. You weren't abusive. You provided for me. You weren't bad parents, just absent in specific ways. And I've processed that. I've built a life where that absence doesn't define me. We want to be part of that life, my father said. Really part of it. Not just superficially. Why? The question seemed to throw him. Because you're our child. I've always been your child. You weren't interested in being part of my life when it looked unremarkable. Now that it's impressive, suddenly you care. That's not. My mother stopped herself. That's partially true. But also, what you said the other night, it made us realize how much we don't know about you. Not just your work. You. Who you are. What you care about. What makes you happy. You never asked those questions before. We're asking now. I studied them. Saw genuine regret. Also saw the discomfort of people confronting an unflattering truth about themselves. Here's what I need you to understand, I said slowly. I don't hate you. I'm not angry. But I also don't trust you the way I did when I was younger. You taught me that your love was conditional, contingent on achievement, on meeting certain standards, on fitting into your narrative. And I learned to live without it. We love you unconditionally, my mother insisted. You love the version of me that doesn't challenge you. The one who accepts whatever role you assign. But the actual me? The ambitious, accomplished, complex person I've become? You never met them. Silence. Can we meet them now? My father asked quietly. I don't know. Can you? We want to try. I sipped my coffee, considering. Daniel called me yesterday. My mother looked surprised. He did. He apologized. For being dismissive, for never taking my work seriously, for treating me like I was always going to be the kid brother who needed guidance. I paused. He sounded genuinely remorseful. We're all remorseful, my father said. Rebecca texted. Long message. Basically said she'd been so focused on her own achievements that she never considered mine. That she'd unconsciously competed with me by making sure I stayed less than. My mother's face crumpled slightly. This is our fault. We created a dynamic where your siblings felt like they had to be better than you instead of supporting you. You created a hierarchy, I agreed. And I was always at the bottom. But that taught me something valuable. External validation is unstable. It can be withdrawn at any time for any reason. So I learned to validate myself. That sounds lonely, my father said. It was. Until I found people who saw me clearly. Like who? My mentor, Diana. My team at work. Friends I've made in my industry. People who value me for what I contribute, not for how I fit into their story. My mother reached across the table, stopped just short of taking my hand. Can we be those people too? Eventually? Maybe. If you're willing to actually do the work. What work? Learning who I am. Being interested in things I care about even when you don't understand them. Showing up consistently, not just when it's convenient. Treating me like an equal to Daniel and Rebecca, not a charity case who exceeded expectations. We can do that, my father said firmly. Can you? Because it means confronting your own biases. Admitting you were wrong. Sitting with discomfort. Being okay with a version of me that doesn't need your approval. They looked at each other. Yes, my mother said. We can do that. Then we'll see. We finished lunch talking about surface things, Rebecca's married life, Daniel's engagement, my parents' upcoming anniversary. Testing the waters of normal conversation. As we left, my father pulled me aside. I need you to know something. What you said at the dinner party, about us not believing in you when it was free. That's been haunting me. Because you're right. We had every opportunity to support you, encourage you, take interest in your potential. And we didn't. We were lazy and complacent, and we missed watching you become remarkable. I'm not remarkable. I'm just good at my job. You're 30 years old and a partner at a prestigious firm. You lead multimillion-dollar projects. People in industries I barely understand know your name. That's remarkable. And we missed it. His voice cracked slightly. We missed you. I felt something shift. Not forgiveness exactly. But acknowledgement that the hurt was real, that the absence had consequences, that the damage wasn't imagined. Yeah, I said softly. You did. Over the following weeks, they tried. My mother sent articles she thought I'd find interesting. Actually relevant to my work, clearly researched. My father set up a monthly dinner, just us, where he asked detailed questions about my projects and actually listened to the answers. Daniel invited me to a game and spent the evening genuinely curious about my life rather than talking about his own. Rebecca called to ask advice about a technical problem her company was facing. Treated me like an expert, not a little sibling. It felt strange, like learning a new language with people I'd known my entire life. At one of those monthly dinners, my father asked, "Are you happy?" Yes. Really? Really. My work is fulfilling. I have good people around me. I like who I've become. Even though we weren't part of building that person? Especially because of that, I said honestly. I had to become someone without your blueprint. That made me more myself. He nodded slowly. I wish I'd known that person earlier. Me too. Can I know them now? I smiled. We're working on it. But I also knew the truth. Things would never be the way they could have been. There would always be a distance, a formality, a carefulness between us that wouldn't exist if they'd seen me from the beginning. They could know me now. They could respect me. They could even love me in their way. But they couldn't rewrite history. Couldn't undo the years of being unseen. Couldn't erase the fact that I'd built myself in their absence. And I didn't need them to. I wasn't useless. I was just surrounded by people who needed me small. And the moment I stopped shrinking, I became exactly who I was supposed to be. 2 years later, I'm sitting in a conference room in Singapore, leading a presentation for a manufacturing conglomerate considering a complete digital overhaul. My team is with me. Priya is now a senior consultant, the 2 others have moved up, and I've added 3 more people. Morrison & Associates is now one of the top 3 firms in our sector. The Anderson implementation succeeded so thoroughly that we've become the go-to consultants for complex integration projects. I'm presenting not as a junior partner anymore, but as a full partner. At 32, my phone buzzes during a break. Text from Rebecca. Saw your byline in Forbes. When were you going to mention you're published in Forbes? I smile and text back. When you asked about my work. She replies immediately. Touché. Proud of you anyway. My relationship with my family has stabilized into something cordial, warmer than it was, but realistic about its boundaries. We have regular dinners. They ask questions. They've met some of my friends. They know the broad strokes of my life. But I don't need their validation anymore. That door closed years ago, and while we've built a new door, smaller, more careful, I know now that my worth doesn't depend on whether they walk through it. The presentation ends. The client is impressed. We'll probably close this deal. That evening, I have dinner with Diana and a few other partners. We talk strategy, laugh about difficult clients, debate industry trends. You've come a long way from that quiet consultant who wouldn't speak up in meetings, Diana observes. I always had opinions. I just learned when to share them. Best skill anyone can have. She raises her glass. To selective visibility. We drink to that. Later, back in my hotel room, I open my laptop to finish some work. But I pause and pull up old family photos instead. Me at 7, 10, 16, 20. In every photo, I'm on the edge. Not quite in focus. Background character in someone else's story. But I look at those photos differently now. Not with sadness, but with recognition. That kid was learning, watching, preparing. They called me the useless child. And that lie built the strongest version of me. Not despite their dismissal, but through it. Because being underestimated gave me room to grow without interference. Being overlooked let me develop without their expectations shaping me. Being invisible taught me to rely on myself. I close the laptop and look out at Singapore's skyline, glittering and immense. Tomorrow, I'll lead another meeting. Close another deal. Build another piece of the career I've created from nothing but determination and the quiet, sustained belief that I was more than they'd ever see. And that's not revenge. That's just life. The best life I could have built. Mine. If you've ever been called the useless one in your family, the one they overlooked, the one they never expected much from, drop a comment below. Let's build a community of people who prove them all wrong. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Tag them. Send it directly. Sometimes people need permission to stop shrinking. Your invisibility was never weakness. It was preparation.